Back in 2014, I found myself in one of the worst spots possible. You've maybe heard of this term in ministry circles or even at work, and it's called burnout. In 2014, I was face down in Africa. I felt like I had no physical strength, no emotional strength, and I felt like I was spiritually depleted. But how did I get there? Well, there were 4 things that happened to me. And once you have burnout, you want to go on the offense and share this with other people because you don't ever want someone to experience a full burnout. The easiest way to describe it is you feel like you fell into a hole, you don't know how to get up, everything that you see is through a dark lens, and you don't know how things are going to get better. You lose your sense of purpose. You feel like God isn't going to be able to use me anymore, and maybe this was all I was created for. I'm going to live a second-rate life for the rest of my life. But if you do these 4 things, this will keep you from experiencing burnout like I did. The first thing that you have to do to make it for the long haul is to stay close and connected to Jesus. Stay close and connected to Jesus. John 15:5 says, I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. You know, you will never make it in ministry if you don't keep your connection with Jesus. That is always the first priority as a follower of Christ. Every morning that you wake up, you should be saying, how can I get closer to Jesus? How can I love him more? How can I experience him today in my life? You know, if you have a thriving ministry but no personal relationship with Jesus, you don't have anything at all. So you always want to prioritize your relationship with Jesus. Here's an analogy on how intimacy with Jesus and ministry relates. When I was living in Africa, as some of you may know, in rural areas, they actually don't have running water. You know, sometimes in the US or other places, we take running water for granted. We just turn on a spigot and the water starts flowing out, and we can pick whether it's hot or cold. Well, when I was living in this village, we had no running water and we had no electricity. So how would we get water to cook and to shower and to clean and to do our laundry by hand? Well, we relied on rainwater. So we actually had a piping system around the top of our house that would collect the rainwater and it would go into this big black bin. Now, the water would go into this big black bin, but there's a little spigot at the bottom that would allow you to pull the water out. So what happens when there's no water in the bin and you open the spigot? It's completely dry. You can't expect any water to come out. And you know, that's the same thing that we do in ministry. You know, the running water is your connection with God. The water going into the bin is your intimacy with God. The spigot at the bottom is like ministry in this analogy. When you open that spigot, all of that stuff comes running out. And in ministry, you're going to be excited, like Pastor Jordan and I are. We're excited to do what we're doing. But when you're making a commitment to pour your life out for other people, it actually saps and takes energy away from you. I know that after I preach every week, I feel like I could take a 3-hour nap because spiritually, I'm giving out everything that I have that I've been working this whole week to prepare for you. So the same thing is true for you. Ministry actually takes from you. You know, it can fulfill you, it can make you feel great, God is there and you're feeling him and you're excited, but it does take your energy away. So what happens in burnout is that you don't have enough intimacy with God going into the tank, and you have too much of a demand at the bottom for water and you run dry. Another way to think about this is like a bank account. If you have a bank account, you can do 2 things with your money at the bank. The first thing that you can do is you can make a deposit. That means that you take money and you put it in the bank account so it grows. The other thing that you can do is you can withdraw, so you can take money away. Now, what happens when you try to take money out of the bank account that you don't have? Well, at my bank, it charges an overdraft fee. That's what they call it, an overdraft fee. You tried to pull too much money out of an account that had nothing in it. So in the physical, you get overdraft fees. And if you get enough of these overdraft fees, what the bank will do is suspend and shut down your account completely. Now, what is it like spiritually? Well, when we are continuing to run and do things without that intimacy, without putting spiritual deposits of intimacy with God, time with Him, connection with God, it leads to an overdraft fee in the spirit, which is called burnout. And if you burn out enough times, just like those overdraft fees, you're going to completely shut down. This is what happened to me. So one of the ways that I can help you to avoid this burnout is to consistently have time with God every day. So how do you have time with God every day? Well, there's 3 simple ways. The first one is you can pick a plan. You pick a plan, say, hey, I'm going to read this, or I'm going to worship at this set time, or I'm just going to say thank you, or I'm going to pray. And when you do that, you want to pick a plan. So you're going to pick what you want to do. The second thing is you're going to pick a time. You're going to pick a time where you meet with God every day. And thirdly, you're going to pick a place. Always have a consistent place where you meet with God. That way you don't have to choose every single day. What am I going to read today? When am I going to meet with God? Where am I going to go? Because if you have all those barriers between you and your time with Jesus, it's never going to happen. Because you're going to be trying to figure out, well, what am I supposed to read? And you're going to flip open your Bible and point to something and be like, Isaiah 22, what the heck? You're not even going to know what you're doing. So have a plan for intimacy. That's one of the ways that you could avoid burnout and go the long haul. So the second way that you can go the long haul and avoid burnout is to stay in your grace zone. Stay in your grace zone. Did you know God won't give you the strength to do what He hasn't called you to do? Think about that. If you're trying to do something other than what God is asking you to do, you're relying on grace that you don't have. Now, what is that going to lead to? You guessed it, burnout. You're going to burn out so quick. You know, God gave you the grace or a divine empowerment to do a specific task that He called you to do. You know, He has a purpose for your life. And if you try to do something different than God's purpose for your life, you're going to start to feel it. You're going to start to get frustrated. And eventually, you're going to burn out completely. A great example of this is with hospice care workers. One time, I met a lady who worked in hospice care. And if you haven't heard of hospice, it's a bunch of nurses that are pretty much like angels. They take care of dying people. So someone is going to die, they call in the hospice care worker, and they come and they feed and bathe the person. They take care of the family. They're literally like angels on earth. And one time I asked a hospice care worker, I said, how are you able to do what you're doing? And she said, oh, I couldn't imagine doing anything else. The reason why I'm doing this is because I have a grace to do it. You see that? She stayed in her grace zone. And I said, well, what happens if someone tries to come into hospice, but they don't have the grace to do it? Like, imagine someone says, I really want to do hospice, but God didn't call them to do hospice. Maybe they were called to do something else. Well, she says, over time, these people will start to burn out. So naturally, they will start to filter out and they'll quit because they can't handle the pressure of hospice. So I want you to think about that today. Are you in your grace zone? Do you feel like you're hitting a stride? Do you feel like you're doing something that God is empowering you to do? Or do you feel like you're pushing a boulder uphill? That's a good question. So with me, I tried many ministries. I tried so many different things before I found my grace zone, which is what I'm doing today. I traveled all over the world. I was a full-time missionary. There was a time where I was cooking meals for 150 people for about a year and then cleaning up the entire mess. There were times that I worked in children's ministry and I led VBS, which is Vacation Bible Study. I've preached in jails. I've gone down the Amazon River in a boat in 115-degree weather, which definitely wasn't in my grace zone. I got bit up by mosquitoes. I got dengue fever. I've been shot at, spit at. I've been in every kind of situation you could possibly imagine. Our bus one time was even taken over and the locals lit tires on fire and in back of our bus, and we're just sitting there thinking we're probably going to die. So I had an idea of what God was calling me to do, but over time, God would lead me out of those things. He actually protected me. So one time I actually called my friend and said, I think God is calling me to live in Africa for the rest of my life. And he was absolutely amazed. And at that time, I literally thought that's what I was going to do. I was helping take care of 2,000 women with HIV. I was ministering in the jails. I was preaching. We started a church. We started an orphanage. In fact, I lived in the orphanage. I lived in one of the bedrooms in the orphanage with the kids, and whenever they would wake up in the middle of the night, I would go and take care of them and then go back to bed. I thought I was in my grace zone. But what was cool was God brought me out of that into something completely different. At the time, I thought that was the best ministry I could ever do. I felt like God had this certain expectation of me. I thought, to be a good Christian, to be a good missionary, I have to go live in Africa. I have to sleep where there's no running water and no electricity. I've got to hurt myself. I've got to eat whatever. And I had all these expectations that God didn't have of me. And I want to free you from that responsibility today. Not everybody's supposed to go to Africa and minister. Not everybody's supposed to be a full-time missionary. God has a specific plan for you. Imagine if you're in banking, if you work at a bank, who else is going to work at the bank if you're not working there? God can use you anywhere you go. So stick with your grace zone. Know where God is giving you the energy and where you're trying to push on your own. The third way to avoid burnout in your life is to remain humble and seek to serve. Proverbs 16:8 says, "Pride comes before destruction, and an arrogant spirit before a fall." Did you hear that? The second you think you're trying to come up, you're already getting torn down. Billy Graham often shared about how when you're in ministry, you have to live above reproach. This is the calling of a servant. It means that you stay above accusation in everything that you do. It means that not only are you not doing the wrong things, but you don't even want to be known as someone who even has the possibility to do those things. When Billy Graham would walk into a hotel, he would never go in an elevator with a woman alone. When he went into his hotel room, he had people take the TVs out. You know, when he sought to serve, he had to humble himself in a brand new way. And he talked about three things that he always tried to avoid as you know, the things that guided his life. They're called the 3 G's. The first one is gold. He always wanted to separate himself from the love of money. He said, you know, I'm not going to pursue the money of my ministry. I'm going to pursue God and let Him provide. The second one was girls. Obviously, as a male minister, if you're a female minister, then you could put guys here. But avoid sexual temptation at all costs. When you're seeking to serve other people, you really have to live above reproach. And the third one was glory. Billy Graham never wanted the glory for what he did. It actually saddened me. This is kind of an interesting moment. After Billy Graham died, his foundation wanted to build this huge statue for him. And I thought, Billy Graham is probably turning over in his grave right now, knowing that someone is like literally fashioning a statue of him and seeking to glorify him, because Billy Graham would have wanted the statue to be of Jesus, right? That's what Billy Graham would have wanted. And that's what we want to do in our lives. We want to glorify God. We don't want to glorify ourselves. When I was living in Africa, there was a girl in our congregation. I was the pastor, and one day I got up to preach and I looked into the crowd and everyone was giggling and laughing. And I said, what in the world's going on? And once I walked down from the podium, one of the girls in the youth ministry came to me and she said, Pastor Andrew, is it true that you went out on a date with one of the girls in the youth group? And I was like, no, I did not. And she had made this accusation that we went to town and fooled around and we were drinking and doing all sorts of weird stuff. But what she didn't know was that I already had a boundary in place. I never went to town alone. And this is what's going to protect you as you're trying to serve and to try to live in humility. So you might be asking yourselves, why should I have to change my life? I'm just trying to help people. You know, that's the wrong mindset. It's not about you. When you live out a high calling, there's a high price, and that comes with humility. Mark 9:35 says this, sitting down, Jesus called the 12 and said, anyone who wants to be first must be the very last and a servant of all. Now, if you don't maintain a position of humility, you are susceptible to the enemy, and the enemy is going to try to bring you down. Remember the verse we talked about, how pride comes before the fall? It's not only your words that can bring a fall, it's your lifestyle that can bring a fall. In fact, I want you to remember this phrase. He will place, this is the enemy will place a foothold in any area of your life that remains unsubmitted to Jesus Christ. The enemy will place a foothold in any area of your life that remains unsubmitted to Jesus Christ. So which of these 3 G's do you need to fix in your life? The gold, the girls, the glory? Are you truly living as a selfless representation of Jesus Christ? If you want to avoid burnout, you need to be humble and seek to serve. Now, the 4th way that you avoid burnout is this: I don't make ministry or anything else an idol. I don't make ministry or anything else an idol. So how can you figure out if you have an idol in your life? It's kind of funny when you read the Bible, you think of an idol as just like an image, and you might think, I don't have any idols at my house. It's completely wrong. An idol is actually something that you prioritize in your life above Jesus. It's actually who you go to before you obey God and ask their permission. So maybe you're thinking in your life right now, well, maybe I have a couple idols in my life. Did you know that 1,700 pastors quit the ministry every month? Did you know that? 1,700 pastors burn out every single month worldwide. Why is that? It's because of one of these 4 reasons. They aren't connected to God. They don't remain humble and serve. They fall out of their grace zone and they get frustrated. And they make other things an idol. They prioritize a sexual relationship in their life. They prioritize making money. They prioritize other things. But we don't want to be like that. And one of the reasons is that they make, an idol out of their ministry. They put systems and structures over their Savior. So my friends, as we're talking about this today, I just want to have a heart-to-heart with you. I want you to know the most important thing that you can do in your life, and this is great because it's going to prevent you from burnout, is to put Jesus at the center of your life. To put Jesus at the center of your life. To make sure that your life is revolved around the presence of God. If you revolve your life around anything else but Jesus, it's going to come crashing down. When Jesus is the center, you will be okay. When Jesus is the center, you will be okay. But if you don't put Jesus at the center and you take him off the throne and put yourself there, you're going to fall. I don't want you in your ministry, as you're building your ministry and as we're going through this year of discipleship, I don't want you to ever fall into that place where you say, oh, I made my ministry an idol. I forgot to pray every day and spend time with Jesus. I forgot to be humble and serve and live above reproach. You're going to come to me later and be asking for prayers. And so right now, I want to encourage you, make Jesus the center of your life and everything will go well in your ministry. God will use you. He'll be glorified and you'll have a wonderful, wonderful reputation in your community.